I've buried a wife, built a business from nothing, and raised 3 sons with hands that never stopped working. So when a 28-year-old woman pointed at my plate and told me there was no extra food at my own son's table, I didn't get angry. I just smiled. Because I've learned something across 67 years of living: the people who try to shrink you always regret it. Always. My name is Harold Mercer. Retired contractor. Grandfather of 4, soon to be 5, God willing. I drive a 2019 Ford pickup that still smells like sawdust no matter how many times I clean it, and I wear the same brand of boots I've worn since 1987. I am not a complicated man. I don't ask for much. I show up, I help, I love my family with everything I have. That's it. That's the whole resume. My son Daniel is the middle one. 34 years old, works in logistics, good heart, a little too agreeable for his own good, which I say with love, because I know where he got that from. His mother, rest her soul, could never say no to anyone either. Daniel married Priscilla 3 years ago. She's sharp, organized, the kind of woman who color codes her calendar and sends follow-up emails after phone calls. I don't say that as an insult. Organization is a virtue. But somewhere along the way, Priscilla decided that running a tight household meant controlling who deserved comfort in it, and that included me. It started small. The way things like this always do. The first Thanksgiving after their wedding, she'd announced that they were simplifying the holiday. Fewer dishes, smaller portions, no leftovers because, and I remember this clearly, we don't want to encourage overeating. I was a guest in their home, so I nodded and said nothing. Christmas, same thing. Carefully measured plates, not a roll more than what she'd decided was appropriate. My son kept catching my eye across the table, with that apologetic look he'd perfected. I'd just wink at him. Let it go. But this particular Sunday changed everything. Daniel had called me Wednesday that week. Said Priscilla was stressed about a work project, the house was a mess, and could I come by Sunday to help fix the back porch railing that had been rotting since spring? Of course. I told him. I loaded my truck Friday night, tools, wood planks, screws, sandpaper, weatherproof stain. Saturday morning I drove the 2 hours to their place, arriving before 8. I figured I'd get started early, save them the trouble. By the time Daniel came outside in his pajamas with 2 cups of coffee, I'd already pulled the old railing clean off and was measuring the replacement boards. Dad, you didn't have to start already. Railing's not going to fix itself, I told him. He laughed. That's my boy. I worked through the morning. Priscilla came out around 10, acknowledged me with a nod, asked Daniel something in a low voice, and went back inside. I kept working. By 1 in the afternoon, the new railing was up, sanded smooth, and I was applying the first coat of stain. Daniel had come out several times, bringing me water, asking questions, handing me tools like he used to do when he was 8 years old, and I was building the deck on our old house. Those were good hours, simple, good hours. Around 2. Daniel came out and said lunch was ready. I washed my hands at the outdoor spigot, dried them on my jeans and followed him inside. The kitchen smelled like something tomato-based, pasta, maybe. Priscilla was already seated at the table, serving herself from a ceramic dish in the center. It looked like baked ziti. My stomach was genuinely grateful. I'd been working hard on nothing but a granola bar. I sat down. Daniel served me a portion. A modest one, but fine. We ate. The conversation was surface level. Her work project, their neighbor's new car, something about the kids' school schedule. I ate slowly. The way I always do. I was hungry enough that I finished before either of them. The dish was still sitting in the center of the table, maybe a third left in it. I reached toward it, naturally, automatically, the way any normal adult at a family table would, and Priscilla's hand came down flat on the table. Not touching me. Just a gesture. A stop. We don't serve extra food, she said. Not unkindly but not gently either. Matter of fact, what's in the dish is for tomorrow's lunch. I looked at her. She looked back. Daniel had gone very still. I put my hand back in my lap, picked up my water glass, and I smiled at her, the slow, patient smile of a man who has dealt with far harder things than a withheld portion of baked ziti, and I said, noted. She seemed satisfied with that. Maybe even relieved that I hadn't made a scene. She turned back to Daniel and resumed talking about something. Daniel still hadn't moved. Under the table, I could tell he was trying to decide whether to say something. I gave the smallest shake of my head now. Let it go. After lunch, I went back to the porch and finished the second coat of stain. I took my time. Did it right. Around 4 o'clock I packed my tools into the truck, covered the stain cans, and went back inside to say goodbye. Daniel was in the living room. He stood up immediately, hand already rubbing the back of his neck. That thing he does when he's uncomfortable. Dad, about lunch. Porch is done, I said. Stain needs 24 hours before anyone leans on it. Should hold another 15 years easy. I hugged him. Held on a second longer than usual. You've got a good home, son. Take care of it. I said goodbye to Priscilla, who was at her desk in the corner of the dining room, laptop open. She thanked me for the porch. Politely, I told her it was no trouble. I drove 40 minutes down the road to a diner I've been going to for 30 years. Ordered the pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, a corn muffin, and a slice of apple pie. Ate every single bite. Left a $20 tip for the waitress, a young woman named Becca who always calls me Mr. Harold and refills my coffee without being asked. I drove the rest of the way home full and unbothered. Here is where the story turns. What I hadn't mentioned to Priscilla, what Daniel knew but hadn't apparently told her, was that I was the reason they had that house. Not in an interfering way. Not in a way I'd ever held over anyone's head. But 3 years ago, when Daniel and Priscilla were trying to buy that place, they'd come up short on the down payment. Market was brutal. They were going to lose the house to another buyer. Daniel had called me embarrassed, and I'd transferred the difference, $42,000, within the hour. No paperwork, no repayment schedule, a gift, because that's what fathers do. Also I had been for the past year and a half, quietly making their monthly mortgage payment, not because Daniel asked. He didn't know. I had set it up through the bank after overhearing a conversation, not snooping. Just present, where Daniel had confided to his brother, that they were stretched thin, that Priscilla's new car and the kitchen renovation had pushed them close to the edge. I called the bank the next morning and arranged it. The payment came from an account Priscilla had no reason to look at closely. I told no one. That Sunday evening, while I was eating my pot roast at the diner, Daniel was apparently having a very long conversation with his brother Marcus, my oldest, who had known about the mortgage. Marcus, who has always been more forthcoming than me, had apparently decided enough was enough. I got the call at 8 that night. Daniel, his voice was different. Dade. Marcus told me about the mortgage. I let the silence sit for a moment. Okay? The down payment. Everything. His voice cracked a little at the edges. I didn't know. Priscilla didn't know. I know she didn't. Dad, she's in the come out. He exhaled. She's really upset with herself. I thought about that for a moment. About what to say. I'm not a man who weaponizes generosity. What I gave freely. I didn't arrange that mortgage payment to hold it over anyone's head. I'd done it because my son needed help. And I was in a position to help. The telling of it now wasn't revenge, it was just the truth arriving on its own schedule, the way truth tends to do. Tell her not to be upset. I said finally. Dad. Daniel. I mean it, I didn't do any of that to earn something back. I did it because you're my son. I paused. But I will say this. I drove 4 hours round trip today. Worked 6 hours on that railing, and went home hungry. Not because of the food. Because I felt like a stranger at your table. And I'm not a stranger. He was quiet for a long moment. I know, Dad. I'm so sorry. It's not your apology to give. He understood what I meant. 2 days later, Priscilla called me. She's not a woman who cries easily. I'd wager she finds it inefficient. But there was a roughness in her voice that told me she'd been doing some of that in private. She didn't make a speech. She said, Harold, I owe you an apology. A real one. And I think I owe you a lot more than that, but I'll start there. I told her I accepted it. There was a pause, and then she said something I didn't expect. She said, I grew up in a house where love was transactional. Where every favor had a price. I think I made an assumption about you that I shouldn't have made. I'm sorry. That mattered to me, that she said that. It takes a particular kind of courage to look inward, instead of defending outward, and I gave her credit for it. I told her. Priscilla, I'm not the enemy. I never was. I know that now, she said, The following Sunday I got back in my truck and drove the 2 hours to their house. No tools this time. Just me and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for something worth celebrating. Priscilla had made a full spread. And I mean full, roast chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, 2 kinds of pie. She put the serving dishes in the center of the table and looked at me and said, plainly and without fuss, "Eat as much as you want." I helped myself to seconds. And then, because I believe in closing the loop on things, I looked at her across the table and smiled the same smile I'd given her the week before. "The slow patient one." "Noted," I said. She laughed. A real one. The first real laugh I'd ever heard from her. Turns out it was a good laugh, bright, a little surprised, the kind that changes a face entirely. Daniel looked between us like he couldn't quite believe it. I reached for more bread. Some lessons cost nothing to teach. You just have to be willing to wait long enough for them to land. I'm Harold Mercer. I've been waiting my whole life and I've never once been in a hurry. That, I've found, is the greatest advantage a patient man has.